It's a sad day in the world of baseball as the news of the passing of Mr. Baseball himself, Bob Uecker, hits the wire today. I'll be joined by Milwaukee native Jason Alexander as we discuss the legacy of Bob Uecker on this episode of the Scho-Zone. All right, everybody, welcome to the Scho-Zone. It is your host, Ryan Schofield. I'm coming at you live from the DeGen here. It's just me for right now. We'll be having Jason in shortly. A little bit of an impromptu message. I really wish I had nailed that intro a little better, but, just the intro speaks for itself. Sad day for baseball. Bob Uecker, RIP at 90 years old. One of those things that, the best way I can describe this, the way I feel about it is that, how I found out about it. I got a text message. I was heading into work today, and based on the time of day and the person that sent me a text message, you just kind of know certain times that if you're certain people contact you at certain times of the day, it's probably not going to be for good news. But a baseball friend of mine, and I got the news that way. And then it's almost like one of those, normally when you hear the news of a 90-year-old person, passing away, while it's unfortunate, you're not exactly shocked. But in this particular case, I was shocked because Bob Uecker was just announcing baseball games for the Brewers a few months ago and didn't seem to show any signs of slowing up in that regards. It's one of those things that is in terms of what an icon he was, which I plan on getting into our discussion with, again, my friend of the podcast. He's been on before, and just also a close personal friend, Jason Alexander, actually grew up in Milwaukee. And I asked him a pretty, direct question about Bob Uecker, and he gave me a very emphatic answer. And I was like, let's gotta get somebody that grew up with him a part of his life a little more. But considering that Bob Uecker, and we say this, and I said the most positive way, I mean, he'd be the first one to say it himself when he was alive, is that for a guy who had a negative WAR as a baseball player, he's probably got one of the biggest legacies, I would say. Or, I mean, just, impressive stats just right off the rip. I mean, Bob Uecker has 14 career major league home runs. I think he played like 6 or 7 seasons, maybe 14 career home runs. 3 of them came off of Hall of Fame pitchers. All right, Jason is on here. So I got him done killing some time here. I'm just going to jump right into it. We've got Milwaukee native Jason Alexander, or Jason, joining us on the show. Jason, welcome to the Scho-Zone. And I guess the way I could say that Bob Uecker, the way he transcends, just how big his presence is that I've got you on here to somewhat talk baseball with me. And that's definitely not your favorite topic. But as I teased in here, I sent you the question after I informed you of the RIP. I said, is he the most popular person in the history of Milwaukee? And your answer was?
No, he's the most popular sports figure in the history of Wisconsin. Like, I would even put him in the realm of, Lombardi. I was going to say
Lombardi's got to be, or
the thing that I think is tough for maybe you guys, I guess maybe Wisconsin, it's all small towns. Like the Green Bay Packers are like a religion. Bob Uecker has been part of the Brewers, and as a kid, you'd listen to the games on the way home. You'd always listen to Bob Uecker, and even when they lost, even when they were getting killed, he was still the best person to listen to. Like I saw one of the quotes was they were down 9-1, and and he goes, "All we need is 2 grand slams to get back in this." Just classic lines. My buddy who realistically has probably listened to 85% of the games that have been called by, like, he does construction and he always has Bob Uecker on. Yeah, it's a big loss for the state of Wisconsin today. Definitely.
And as I was, just kind of alluded into earlier on this, is it just came out of left field there. I guess I could say that normally when you tell me a 90-year-old person passed away, I'm kind of like, oh, good run. I was blown away. I'm like, the guy was just announcing games a couple months ago.
Yeah. And he looks great. Like, he's always looked like, that's to me, like when you see him in his 80s, you're like, oh, that dude was a professional ball player. I can see the physicality of this guy.
Right. I mean, my introduction to him is as Harry Doyle, which, that means that if he was 90, that means he was 60 when that,
Yeah.
or in his 50s. And I mean, he kind of had that, he kept looking the same. And I mean, I don't, necessarily, I mean, he seemed like somebody that enjoyed, having fun outside of the ballpark, a
Well,
little
he
bit.
enjoyed a couple sodas. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, you can't be the staple for the city of Milwaukee without, tipping a few back, I guess, every now and again.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, he did the Miller Lite beer commercials and whatnot. Like, I just still think of, again, the realm that he's held in is that when, like, I just, to have, if there was ever coverage of it, but the idea that him and Artie Lang and Norm Macdonald spent a day together.
Yes.
And for Norm and Artie's, conclusion of that is going, he's the funniest guy ever. Like, he wasn't a comedian. He was a professional baseball player, but they still get that from two of my favorite comedians of all time. For them to say, oh, yeah, no, everything he said was hilarious. Like,
and some of the lines are so, like, I'll the fact that he has 14 home runs and 3 of them were off of, one was Gaylord Perry. The other one was Ferguson Jenkins. And then the other one was Sandy Koufax. And he always used to say the same thing. He would say, and I really thought Sandy Koufax was going to be kept out of the Hall of Fame because of me.
I mean, that just going on too, to say that I was looking up his stats today, which we call it the Mendoza line in baseball, which is meant to be hitting below 200. Bob Uecker's career batting average was exactly 200.
Yes.
14 career home runs. And a member of the 1964 St. Louis Cardinals World Series championship team, which, he was obviously the self-deprecating humor played well. But I mean, apparently the word amongst the Cardinals was that, no, we wouldn't have won it without him, because a guy like him to loosen the tension of the losing streaks, or just kind of to keep everybody at ease. And like, I know that feeling of that there are people who are not necessarily the best part of the team, but you can't have the team without them, kind of thing. And that was,
and I'd also heard, and maybe you know a lot more about baseball, but I had always heard that he was actually a really good defensive catcher. Like, that was kind of his thing, that he caught knuckleballs, that he was a good defensive catcher. Like, he was just good enough to stay in the big leagues, but if they needed a backup catcher, it basically was his job.
Yeah, I just saw his quote here. I got a page of his quotes up, and the way to catch a knuckleball is wait till it stops rolling and then pick it up.
Yeah.
Which, just simple, dumb, fun. But I mean, mostly also too is that just showing that, as far as his comedic talents, is that you don't need to say funny stuff if you deliver it well. And he had this really good deadpan delivery. I mean, his Hall of Fame induction was basically a stand-up comedy. It was kind of a roast of himself that he gave himself. But just kind of is he kidding? Is he serious? But just kind of, very mumming that, obviously.
The line that, and I hope this is true, that Gaylord Perry would walk into a restaurant, walk into any baseball thing, and if Bob Uecker was there, he would announce to the room, there he is. Yeah. There's the worst moment of my life.
Yeah,
not my baseball life, but my life.
That was, I've seen that. I believe that is true, because I actually, I used to go down, during the summertime, during baseball season, go down those little, YouTube rabbit holes. And I do believe that, yes, that was actually reported by Bob Costas, or, or it was, I believe it was posed to him in the question of it. But I mean, it's just a rough little stretch. And I mean, it's only going to get, we just lost Ricky and Bob Uecker, two guys who we could just live off of just their quotes, not even what, I mean, but Bob, it wasn't as much on the field, it was off the field. But, as I still go on, I watched a lot of clips of, Major League is my favorite baseball movie. And I usually don't even think it's up for discussion, but I don't think that movie works without Bob Uecker.
I don't think it does either. He's a critical to that movie. By the way, I heard somebody talk about this. Has there ever been a career, he only was a baseball player for like 6 seasons. Like, how the hell did he end up being like literally Johnny Carson's professional guest? How do you go from baseball to that?
The word just must have gotten around. I mean, baseball players were king at one point in time. And then also, there was he also, told the line a little bit. There was one little controversy of that him and Bob Gibson holding hands in a St. Louis Cardinals team picture was not really accepted so well in 1964, being that, Bob Uecker was a white guy and Bob Gibson was not a white guy.
In an interview with Hawk the announcer for the White Sox, they said part of the reason Uecker was on that team or some of those teams during the integration times is I guess Uecker could beat the fuck out of you. Like, I guess Uecker was a tough guy. Like, he was a legitimate tough guy. And
I mean, to play catcher back then, I think that was just kind of a default. You had to be a bit of a tough guy. But yeah, I mean, also, I mean, he for him to hold up as well as he did, you know, I mean, again, like you said, at 90 years old, he still looked like, you know, he was, it wouldn't shock me if he was still playing golf, you know, at a pretty decent clip, you know, the way he looked anyways. But, I mean, I just think about that. I mean, I'm turning 40 this year, and I'm kind of like, I lose my attention span drifts, and I find myself not making sense. And he was actually still calling baseball games, like I said, as recently as 3 months ago. I mean, I believe he was in the booth for when Devin Williams gave up the homer to Pete Alonso. I think he was announcing that. Like,
yeah, I think he was. I had heard that he wasn't doing as much traveling. That he would only do a lot of home games, and you know, he would do some games in Arizona and things like that. But for the most part, he that was what, you know, as we have had to go through the last presidential cycle, like, as people age, they lose that crispiness of their voice. And I always felt like Bob Uecker still had it. Like, Bob Uecker, to me, if you just closed your eyes and listened to a Major League Baseball or him today, it would be like, that's the same person.
Well,
you know,
you hear him from Major League and it's like, oh, that sounds like Bob. You know, it has a very distinct sound to him, like, you know, that life to it, which, you know, again, like, where like Vin Scully's a guy that, you know, I mean, immortalizes baseball announcers, but Bob Uecker just sounds like a guy you want to hang out with.
Yes. Well, I mean, the stories of that, you know, Norm Macdonald telling him the cough button. I mean, those things are just unbelievable stories.
There was one even that was even better that Artie, they had to wait until Frank Sinatra died actually to tell a story. And it's like one of these most like, just like lost in the times things, but it worked out. I forget what baseball player it was, but like one of the Wilhelms or something like that. This whole thing where somebody played a prank on a baseball player and made him believe that they hooked up with a minor or something and that they were in trouble, and it turned out to be a prank. And then it fast forward, it turns on to that. I think it was Don Drysdale, or I'm butchering it so badly, but if you search up Artie Lang stories, but it's the story about like Sinatra getting some goons to kidnap this baseball player, take him out into the middle of the Vegas desert, dig his own hole and stuff, and like, then they find out, oh yeah, by the way, such and such says you're welcome or something like that. And then they go back and like, Uecker's telling this most horrific story ever, and Bob and Norm and Artie are just kind of like, what? And then he says like, you little pansies, you guys, you know, like kind of like, you know, you guys, you kids couldn't hack it kind of deal. But you know, even just finding out, I wish I could have more prepared, but I kind of feel like in honor of him, finding out that his entire character, the entire dialogue that he gave out in Major League, which he was so integral to, was just completely improv. Because again, he is equal parts sounding of a baseball announcer, as professional as could be, which he was, but his comedic abilities and timing in that, like, those are all just thrown together lines. It's just like, it's like Don Rickles calling a baseball game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, they said during the Hall of Fame speech, which was one of the, you know, probably the most Googled Hall of Fame speech for baseball, but you know, it was 18 minutes and he didn't go up with a piece of paper. You know, he just went up and just started talking stories, you know, just started acknowledging, you know, and the thing that I think that everybody appreciated about him, at least I always did, was first off, Bob Uecker was a fantastic ball player. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was a Major League Baseball player.
You're in the 1%. I mean, like,
he's in the 1%. And
I think it's that there's only been like 23,000 people that have played in Major League Baseball or something ridiculous. You can't even fill a stadium with the number of people that have appeared as Major League Baseball players.
Yeah, and yet he was so self-deprecating about himself. You know, just like he would, you know. One year he batted one. I was watching Johnny Carson, and Johnny's looking at his baseball card and goes, "This year you batted 187 or 147." And he's like, I wasn't trying that year. You know, and it's just like he always had a great response for it. One of the things he said, if a guy hits 300 every year, what does he have to look forward to? I always tried to stay around 190. And then next year I'm going to really show him. He always had something to look forward to, is what he was saying.
Yeah, he made the most out of it. I mean, and just a life worth remembering, a life that most many would love to live. I mean, again, it still was just calling baseball games as recently, golfer, the whole 9 yards. Seemed like, probably had his way with the lady. I mean, he was married but it struck me as that he probably could have his way with the town if he wanted to in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I'm not. We don't, there's no evidence of that, but I'm sure.
No, I'm just saying you can just tell that he probably could.
He probably didn't have a lot of trouble talking to people. He was
right. And I mean, so you as a resident of Milwaukee, did you ever cross paths with him at all, or what was the closest you ever came to him?
He was always like, you would almost like hear it like a rumor. Like he would be, the Brewers are at Big Daddy's downtown Water Street. So you'd try to get over to where they were. And, Uecker would sometimes be with them. I never interacted with him. I never was lucky enough to. But it was almost like you'd hear like a rumor. This is before the internet, really before cell phones, at least when I was running the, places on Water Street. You'd look over and every now and then Robin Yount would be there or, somebody like that. But Uecker I never saw, but you really would hear about him. Like, oh, Uecker was doing shots at, Fitzgibbon's pub downtown last week, and you'd hear them, him tying one on somewhere, and all the stories where he was just one of those guys. Robin Yount tells a story about how he was marching them down the street one day, like marching the Brewers down the street, just down the street. And cops, this was in Detroit, and I guess the cops pulled over and like, what are you guys doing? And I guess Uecker goes, well, what do you think we're doing? What are you doing? And apparently the cops started marching with him. Like it's like a famous story where then the cops were in a parade with the Brewers drunk back to their hotel. I mean, it's just wild. Some of the stories that he led.
And I mean, obviously I never met him or anything, but I always, Major League's my favorite. I've always loved his role as the announcer. And since I wasn't good enough to play, this is what I do is I talk. But I did have, when I went to visit Milwaukee this summer, and I was to me, it's always Miller Park, but it's Great American Family.
Yeah,
Field
whatever
it
is now.
But I was unaware that they have the statue of the seats of him all the way in the top in section 422. That's the thumbnail for this episode, is the picture I took of him. And I guess the story behind that is the last seat they installed in the entire stadium was the seat that they gave to his statue.
Yes.
So, and I got to imagine that that's going to be it's going to be a mess next opening day, because that was my big thing is I ran all the way up in that the hottest fucking part I've ever been in a ballpark, because the enclosure at that stadium just basically means it zips in all about. Yes, Zippy, you did tell me about the statue. Thank you. When you're, it was 95 degrees that day, and then you just kind of have all the heat that's rising up from the crowd just soaking up in there. But I ran all the way up to the top of that, place there and just sat down and just dripping with sweat, but got my picture taken next to that statue. So I guess I could say at least I got, it was meant to be, I guess. That was the closest
remember
thing to get there. But now that's going to be the
stadiums.
most popular seat in the entire stadium, probably.
Remember, he's got two statues. He's got one outside the building and one inside the building.
I don't think I saw the one outside. I don't know.
He's got one outside, or he's got one around the park somewhere. He's got one outside and inside.
And I mean, now they might as well just put one up of him at City Hall, basically, at this point.
Yeah,
or,
I would really, to me, and I think maybe it's just because I'm a child of the 80s and people don't remember these days, but I remember you'd leave kindergarten or you'd leave first grade or second grade, and you'd get home and you'd listen to the Cubbies, or you'd be able to watch the Cubbies because they always played day games.
Yeah,
and then later on that night, you'd be out you'd be out doing whatever, and you could listen to Uecker, talk about baseball. And to me, that was always kind of like what I remember about summer is, watching the 7th and 8th and 9th inning after school. And then later on that night, you could listen to the Brewers. So I've always been a Brewer / Cub fan, because the Cubs, they were in different they were in different divisions back then, so they never played. So you
Yeah,
didn't
they were
have to
different
worry
leagues.
about
Yeah.
that. So it was always like, and I just will always remember, during the summers, listening to the Brew Crew get their ass kicked, and Bob Uecker would be hilarious.
But they
They didn't.
they won a World Series in the 80s, right? Or no, they
Nope.
made it to the World Series in the 80s. They
Yeah,
didn't win it.
the Harvey Wallbangers in '82 made it.
Yeah.
That was the Robin Yount, Paul Molitor, Cecil Cooper team. I'm forgetting a lot of them because it's so long ago. But and then I think in '87 they won the pennant, and then that was about it. They only made that World Series that one time, I believe, or at least since when Bob Uecker was announcing.
Yeah, no, and then that was kind of one of the things I remember kind of seeing even before this year, because I mean it was kind of prophetic, I guess, but I remember seeing at one point that everybody should be rooting for the Brewers in the postseason, and he was the reason why.
For
kind
sure.
of just, all things being equal, that give him a reason to keep going. And it's like, again, where there's just came no warning. Like I remember, this was a rough year for baseball in terms of people that they lost, because I think Gibson was this year as well too. Willie Mays was gone this year,
Yeah.
and like with Willie Mays, it wasn't as shocking, I would say, because once they announced he was not going to be attending you
kind of knew.
Yeah, that's when they wasn't going to be at the All-Star game. You're kind of like, ooh, that's not, that's usually not one of those things. But like again, like I just kind of think
Willie was old. How old was Willie when he died?
I think he was just a little bit. I think he was in late 80s. I think he was just a little younger than 90. So they came up at the same time. That the same two players. And I mean, and you look at Willie Mays, who was like the poster child for I'm an amazing athlete as a young kid, as far as abs on top of abs, I guess would be the way to describe it, or chiseled from stone, I guess. And then Bob Uecker, who, again, looked like an in-shape guy, but also looks like somebody that was, potentially hanging out, till last call as well, too.
Yeah, defending now, I've always believed that I think that baseball players from that day could play today.
Oh, yeah. I think that
I think it's the one sport that it's pretty, it's like hand-eye coordination. You still got to put a round ball and a round bat. They'd have different training. I still think that Willie Mays would be able to play really well today.
I just think that the fact of the matter is that those guys had the mental approach to it. I mean, they give them some time where it's like, if you put them up in their first at bat against someone like Paul Skeens, it's probably not going to go very well. If you make that there all day, every day, I just even think of like when people talk about with Babe Ruth, and like they just talk about like their ability to test human, the human physicality back then, and they would just say his eyes are this much faster than everybody else's. Like, they actually said that he probably could have been swinging harder, but he used to hold his breath at the point of contact, which meant he wasn't getting as much force into it. Like some of these little things where, or maybe if somebody pointed them in the right direction and told them, hey, maybe eat a salad here and there or something, or, here, take these things, they'll help you recover faster. Not,
I don't want
training used to be for people to
help.
get into shape, not for them to actually harness their craft. Like,
yeah, baseball is the one sport where I don't want you to get healthy. I want you to be chewing a wad of tobacco, sitting on the bench with a beer belly, getting ready to have a couple pops before you play. I mean, those guys.
I could say that I think golf could fall into that too.
Yeah,
I mean, like
for sure.
Golfers now are actual. Because I remember one of my buddies was a good golfer coming up, and like him talking about he had a workout plan. I'm like, what kind of exercises could you be doing for golf or whatever? And he started talking about all these core workouts they were doing, and I'm like, wait, that doesn't seem like, then suddenly started noticing that every golfer was basically, and we talked about this in a prior time, everyone's just kind of cut from this prototype. Okay, you're going to be 6'2", 185 with the body fat around 6% probably.
Yeah, and the sheer amount of time that golfers spend speed training now, like that's what they do most of the time now. They just speed train.
And honestly, I feel like the part of it is, as I could say now, knowing what I know, at least as I aged out a little bit, is that you need to be in shape to be able to practice golf appropriately.
Yeah,
sure. Because you can only I kind of look at that you can hit you got so many swings before you started losing the ball a little bit, to really drive and explode through contact, it starts, you start losing it after a little while, or I kind of look at it as that, people have told me, and I've slowly been learning how to calm down a little bit, that, hitting a bucket of balls is not meant to be a cardio event. Actually, I think it was you that told me that.
Yeah, it probably was.
But anyways, just wanted to, well, I guess while we're on Wisconsin things here, I guess we'll just, we can mourn the end of the season. Now, I do remember on his first starts, you had texted me about your Packers quarterback, Jordan Love, saying he's going to be good. He's not going to be great.
Yeah.
I think that what's the sliding scale of good? Because I mean, one thing
this is what I said, and I think unfortunately I think I'm ended up being right. I said that his apex was Dak Prescott. Like, and I mean that with respect to Dak Prescott. I'm not saying that as, just looking at the type of player and the type of numbers he threw. Jordan Love, I think that was very disappointed about the Green Bay Packers. And if you watch them all year, I think anybody would have to acknowledge it's really the most talented team in the NFL. They are the youngest team in the NFL. They had 2 players over the age of 32, over the age of 30 on their entire team. They are
Is their coach even 32?
Yeah, I don't think how old the coach is, but they were the poorest fundamentally run team I think I've ever watched. They threw Jordan Love led the league in interceptions in the red zone. They turned the ball over all the time. They were extremely highly penalized teams, and it was the way that they got penalized. I mean, people were on about the Eagles. We gave the Eagles 3 turnovers, 1 on a kickoff, and we held them to 22 points.
Oh, the Eagles, I don't feel good about them. And then they get the luck. They get the luck factor of playing the Rams, coming off of their houses being burned down, and they get to play them in the coldest game ever played in Philadelphia. When
that Eagles team, I watched that game going. That was the way they lost football games all year. They would turn the ball over in the first half. They'd spot a team 17 or 18 points, just giving it to them, and then they'd come back. They always came back. This Eagles game was one of the first games that they didn't at least make a run back at it. It was a pretty disappointing year if you're a Packer fan, just because you had to watch all the mistakes, because it was just a mistake-prone football team. That's what it was.
I think it's also frustrating knowing of that. As good as that team was, they still legitimately were the 3rd best team in that division.
For sure.
And at least one of the problems is going away. The other one might not be going away for a little bit, but it was a perfect fitting of that. I hated that the Eagles and the Packers had to play, because I look at Jalen Hurts and Jordan Love as what I hate about the NFL is that, this guy played a good year, we got to give him a contract.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
And now you're kind of, in that where it's like, hey, Malik Willis, not saying he's completely the answer, but all of those young receivers, you're going to have to pay those guys at some point in time.
Yeah. No, I think the NFL is going to have there's got to be a real coming to Jesus moment with, there should be for Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. I'm talking about top flight NFL money. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. I would argue that he could probably get that money. Am I missing somebody that you would consider?
I mean, here's the thing: is I don't want to say Burrow, because Burrow's had two of the best wide receivers in the NFL his entire career. So,
and also Burrow. Let's just say for this argument, let's say those 4 names are at the top 4. There's a big drop before the next one.
I've been saying the big problem I have is I'm turning into that old man yelling at clouds with the NFL. Is that the problem is that they've made it when there has been good quarterback matchups, I'm reminded as how good of a game that can possibly be. The problem is that there's 32 teams, and I think there's only really 8 to 10 quarterbacks capable of playing at a high level. And then beyond that, there's a couple of them that show some flashes. Again, at some point in time, another game this weekend was the Chargers and the Texans, where it's Justin Herbert is really a good-looking quarterback until you ask him to look like a good quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, on paper, all the statistician QB nerds think he's the greatest thing that ever since sliced bread. He is what he is. He's an okay quarterback.
But it's not even a game-to-game basis with him. It's drive by drive.
Yeah.
He'll have some I just think of against the Chiefs, it looked like they couldn't get a first down the entire first half. And then he goes out and he leads 2 touchdown drives. And then it's just when the game's in the line and he's driving the team on the field and going, he's not going to get a touchdown. They're going to settle for a field goal here. He's not going to, he has all of the tools to do everything. He just doesn't do everything with it. Jordan Love, I
Now,
just kind of looked at it as that we're really got excited about him is that like for about like half of last season, it was like, are we sure he's a starter? And then it was, okay, he
then it
played
was,
okay down the stretch.
what do
And
you
then
think he
that win
is?
against the Cowboys, which the Cowboys maybe were just a team in disarray.
Yeah.
It was really came out there and 1/2 against the Niners. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, Jordan Love, take all of our money.
What do you think? This is what I think. And I freely admit I'm an extremely big Packer fan. So maybe I'm skewed. I think that Jordan Love could potentially be a Super Bowl winning quarterback, but at the very bottom level. So, like, if I would think he's the 8th best quarterback in the league, I think that's what he's going to be. I don't think he's there next, but I'm saying that's his, like, next year and on, he could be the 8th best.
Well, here's where I would say for the Packers in his case, he can't lose them games. You can never have your quarterback lose you games. Okay. And that's what he kind of was doing.
Yeah.
You get into that thing of that if can we put him in a position where we could ask him to win? You know, I kind of think that you can. I mean, like I looked at probably the biggest game that I watched, you know, start to finish this year was a game against the Lions on Thursday night. And it was, as I was just saying, like he started off the game terribly slow, and I made the tweet out there going, "Are we sure about this guy?" And like from the time I made that comment, he just all of a sudden was just laser focused. But then they had that one iffy penalty that happened on a touchdown that got called back in the red zone, and then it was just like never to be heard from again.
Yeah.
I think that
he's an extremely streaky quarterback. Well, I think like almost insanely streaky.
Where I would say that he could potentially get himself there is that all of those quarterbacks we just mentioned, Jason, are all in the AFC. I think the NFC is completely wide open. And again, like, I mean, we're really talking about a team that the two best teams in the conference, or we'll even go 3 if we want to include the Vikings in this record wise, but where Jared Goff, Jalen Hurts, and fucking Sam Darnold, like, I mean, the NFC is open for the taking if somebody wants to take it, I guess I would say.
Yeah, and I mean, after the turd of a game that Josh Darnold just played, was our division that good, or were we just like hot during the regular season? Like, I mean,
well, the Packers didn't play good against any of the good teams they played. Really, I don't think that they lost.
But sometimes I think that they in the game against Brazil, against the Eagles, that game was on a shit field.
Yeah, that I don't count that game. That was also too early in the season for, that was when they were still in the preseason. So
losing the game to the Vikings, they spotted them. They actually losing the game to all 4 of them. They the Detroit Lions and the Vikings, they essentially just spotted them 20 points, and then they came back. So I really didn't even they were always a team that they were the classic team that just beat themselves. Like they just beat themselves. If they didn't make a turnover like the opposing team did, then we would have slaughtered them. But we decided to turn the ball over 4 times. Tom Brady in one of the games was so funny when he was calling it. He goes, it was like a third and goal. He goes, you know what? This Packer team is not very disciplined or organized. And I was like, yeah, that's what it feels like.
Well, I'm sure he can call that out pretty well because, I mean, he was always a part of a disciplined and organized, He
was just like, they just seemed to be unorganized and undisciplined because they would make so many stupid penalties in a game and so many stupid turnovers. It was honestly, I had flashbacks of what it was like to have Brett Favre as your quarterback for 7 years.
I was glad you brought up that name because I want to segue to that one. There's that, there was a meme that was circulating around today that was talking about if Lamar Jackson wins a Super Bowl this year and an MVP, then you can already start talking about him as being a top 5 quarterback of all time, which I think is completely fucking asinine. Yeah. But then someone brought up as they're like going, wow, just recency bias. And they brought up that from 95 to 97, what Brett Favre accomplished in the NFL. And it's just like, yeah, that's a stretch where he led the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns every year. He had 3 MVPs in there, 1 Super Bowl ring. And if not for John Elway and the helicopter, he's got 2 out of those. I mean, and
that's that fucking helicopter. I fucking hate that play.
And it's like, we really have, I mean, that's been one of the things about seeing social media is you're getting all these flashbacks this time of the year of that 10 years ago, this game, 20 years ago, this day. And like, I'm getting more convinced I'm not that old guy yelling at clouds. When I see clips of top-notch quarterbacks at the peak of their powers, they're just night and day so much better than the guys we got playing today. Like watching, young Brett Favre playing. It's just like, all right, it's like, you know, like
I think my favorite of what you're talking about is when and by the way, you know, this is Tiger Woods winning in 19, winning the Masters. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable that he won the Masters at his age at 43. It's unbelievable that he, you know, it's an amazing golf story. Jack Nicklaus shot a goddamn 31 on the back, birdied 7 out of the last 10 holes at the age of 46. That was the greatest single run of golf history that can never be duplicated almost. You know, but that recency bias, I agree with you. It's when they start saying these names where it's like, you know, Lamar Jackson, yeah, he's a great player. Derrick Henry's a great player. Derrick Henry's not a top, you know,
Derrick Henry looks great, and then you watch a clip of Adrian Peterson 10 years ago, and you're like, oh shit, that was, you know, like literally again, like someone told me I was cherry picking something, but like I saw an old random highlight of Favre on the Vikings handing off to Adrian Peterson, and I'm watching Favre throw daggers to Sidney Rice, and I'm like, all right, we haven't evolved from these guys. They were fucking like they were really fucking good. Like
they were really good. And Brett Favre, well, I will always remember one of the best parts about being a Brett Favre fan is you never knew how amped up he was until that first throw came out. And like his first throw, he would fire it as fast as he could, as hard as he could at something. You didn't know where it was going to go. The ball would end up in like 10 rows back on like a simple screen pass. He'd turn around and just gun it with everything he had. It was the best. But I don't think he ever completed an opening pass in his career, probably. He just threw it.
Helps the legacy, though, for Bob Uecker as being, like you said, the most beloved person in Wisconsin history, because Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers have kind of worked their way out of that conversation of ever being a possibility. So
yeah, I'll tell you, that's the one thing that I think was the most shocking to me about these last couple Packer years is we lost supposedly the greatest in my opinion, I would have argued this the day before he left, saying that, in my opinion, I think that Aaron Rodgers was the best thrower of a football I ever saw.
I still agree with you.
I never saw anybody throw a ball like he did. But there was always a rumor about his leadership. There was always a rumor that he wasn't really a good team builder. You heard it from Greg Jennings. You heard it from Brett Favre. And when everybody heard it from Brett Favre, we were all like, he's just being a sour grapes. The moment he leaves, we've won more playoff games in the last 2 years than we did the last 10 years with him. So they're realistically, Aaron Rodgers might have been a team cancer, and just we didn't know it as well. You know, I used to blame Mike McCarthy, but was Aaron Rodgers kind of a part of it? You know,
I see the thing that goes on is that I would love to have seen. I either say that, you know, we look at it two ways. Aaron Rodgers either picked the wrong time to start sucking or the wrong time to start being himself. I would have been very curious to see how it would have gone over if he had this persona when he was legitimately the MVP, like when he was legitimately the guy that we just described. Like, you know, like it would have been so much more. I want to see someone at the height of their powers also embrace their weird side as well. Yes. But it's like, yeah, it's probably not the best that you have videos of you doing drugs in the off season and then you show up looking like this, you know, but then also the Bradys, the Tigers, the LeBrons have ruined it where it's like, yo, you're not supposed to be playing at your best. Like everyone looked at it as Rodgers is washed up, and it's like, you know, hey, maybe him and Kirk Cousins coming back from Achilles injuries in their late 30s, maybe that's just, you know, that used to be normal, you know, kind of thing. Like nobody was pounding on Phillip Rivers his last year in Indianapolis, you know. It was kind of like, oh, well, that's what happens when you get old. Like,
God, yeah, that's such a great line. Like, by the way, I'm so over these like autobiographical documentaries that these people are doing, where it's like the Aaron Rodgers production crew films him in his, you know, it's
where
like,
you control the narrative of these things. Yes, and it's only going to get worse ever since Jordan did it. With the Last Dance. Now everybody wants to have their last dance.
Jordan was the worst. I didn't like the Last Dance because it was too Jordan. Like I enjoyed Tiger's because Tiger at least talked about the bad sides, talked about the mistakes he made. He had the courage to be like that. Whereas Michael Jordan, I I didn't hear about the time where he lost almost $500 million to Billy Walters, betting on golf. You don't hear about that time.
Yeah, no, and then ultimately it just kind of turned into a little bit of a Scottie Pippen smear fest, a little bit, all
Yeah.
that,
Well,
kind of.
because he's such an egomaniac, he can't acknowledge how good Scottie Pippen was. Scottie Pippen was it hurts his narrative. It hurts the brand that Jordan was the only part of that team that was great. That team
Scottie didn't do himself any favors by still saying that he wouldn't, he still would not have gone in for that. That was, on his own a little bit.
That was on his own.
But yeah, but it definitely didn't pay because here's the thing is that, you saying that we watched Scottie Pippen play. Now everybody just looks up stats, and it drives me crazy when I see any of those stat sheet comparisons, and it's like, oh, was he really one of the best? It's like those stats then don't mean shit to me today now, because
nothing.
Legitimately, name me your best scorer in the NBA today, and both of them together, actually. I mean, like, this is an unheard of thing, but I mean, Pippen and Jordan used to pressure the ball all the way down the court, and you're just good luck. Good luck.
They were suffocating on how good a defense both of them could play. Scottie Pippen could guard 4 positions on the court. He was unbelievable. And by the way, as much as as much as I didn't like Jordan's, he was an unbelievable defender. Jordan cared about defense, and so did Scottie Pippen. Those guys were a really tough twosome.
Oh, and I mean, you could see that because Jordan, I mean, there's been, the clips that go on there. I mean, I actually just saw that there was somebody that actually just shot somebody, a friend of his, over a Jordan LeBron debate. And I'm at the point of that, if I'm ever in a Jordan LeBron conversation, can you just kill us all, please?
I will agree, yeah.
But I will say that there's the one clip they showed side by side, because right now LeBron just plays like, cherry pick defense, kind of, where it's just him, just, kind of stand there. But they showed Jordan at 40 on the Wizards, and he's legitimately following the ball all around the court, because in his own head, the psycho he is, I know this now, where like I have this now, doing the physically active thing. Like if I go running, I remember running and feeling like I just ran a great mile, and I'm like, I probably got under 7 minutes there. I felt great during that. And I looked down, I'm like 8:35. Are you fucking kidding me?
I
know. Like, one thing, I'm proud to run an 8 minute and 35-second mile, but I'm like, I thought that I was like, I felt like I was back in my 6-minute days, like.
I always tell people, I do, because I'll do like box jumps. I'm 47, and years past, 36 box jumps, no problem. I just up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Now I can jump up really well, and then I gotta like look down, stabilize myself, put
you
one.
You can already feel the shock absorption in the knee, or the lack of cartilage there. Yeah, I know that.
I almost got to make sure to almost parkour it on the way down to eliminate as much shock as I can possibly take.
Yeah, it's
getting old's the worst.
Thanks. I have that much more to look forward to. Well, I guess one more little old man topic of mine. Just I'm curious of your thoughts on this one. Where did you come out on the college football playoff, and where do you think after year one?
I think there's, there was always, maybe I texted this to you. There was always, and I think we all kind of knew this, that especially people that follow sports or college football, it seems like there's almost really the top 2 or 3 teams, and then everybody else. And I think that's what you saw. I think the expansion, while extremely uninteresting, I was listening to Dan Patrick also talk about this, just how uninteresting the NFL football playoffs are normally.
Yes.
The point is that it is an upset. So that actually made me think of, I think this is something where maybe 12 teams is too much. Maybe they should go to 8. And now we're also cherry picking this discussion too, but maybe I've been interested in it. I've watched a lot of the games. It will be interesting to see how NIL has really changed things, because Notre Dame for decades was always the team that we just used to laugh at in big games. Well, now they went out and bought all their players. So now we're going to see if this is a real deal team.
The added on top of that, though, they don't have to split with the conference out of this. All this this whole big thing to me was just a big way of giving the SEC and the Big Ten more money. And hey, Notre Dame, you're always invited. That was kind of the way I shook this out. And then we can say, hey, Boise's and the other little feel goods, we give you your opportunity, even though we really know you don't have a chance. Like,
That
And
it shocked me how little of a chance they had. I was a little bit shocked by that. I thought like Boise, maybe I wanted to believe that college football was more even than it was, but it's clear that there's in college football, you're always going to have that one or two teams that really hits the home run where they get 4 or 5 NFL players, and that team is just so dominant they can take over.
But what's killing me now with college, and again, this is a valid complaint, and I think that this is going to lead to the overall quality decline across all sports. Is I miss the building of a program. Like there was, like first off,
Yeah.
it's all part of this ring culture thing that if you did not win a national title or you did not win a championship, then the season was a failure. And I understand elements of that, but like there used to be some pride of people being like, oh, they finished 4th in the country last year. Like
Sure.
that used to being 4th in the country used to be a good thing. Now it's okay. You got these limits around to go, but you would even have like in the NCAA tournament, some team that was, had some underclassmen might make it to the Sweet 16 and give the 1 seed a game or something like that. And then it would be like, oh, you got to watch out for this team next year. Now they're already all transferred out of there, and it's it makes it look bad on the sense of that, there's the 2 ways going about it. Like there was the coach at Miami, Jim Larinaga, the basketball coach who led George Mason. Guys had 3 coaching jobs in the last 40 years or something like that. But then finally, when he makes a Final Four in Miami, where he finally gets that big money job, and then Miami makes the Final Four, then all the players in their exit interviews say, hey, coach, we loved it, but we're going to get more money elsewhere. And it's like, you can't stop the kids from doing that. I mean, I get that side of it, but also like the guys that actually like coaching and building programs. I mean, like, you get a certain attachment to these people that are, the idea of forecasting forward where it's like, you really can't build the program that you want to when it's just, we got you guys here for a couple months. Let's make it work,
Yeah, I think the, everything in, the NCAA is the most fraudulent, probably most incompetent organization anyone can possibly think of. And they're just complete vomitous decisions of just saying, do it this way. Is just ridiculous. I'm all for an NIL. I think that people deserve to earn earn as much money as they can. This is America. Deal with it. But there has to be regulations involved with everything that involves money. Anytime
so NIL was supposed to be meant for if you're able to earn something off your name, image, and likeness. It was meant for the Tim Tebows of the world. Yeah. It was meant for the Johnny Manziels, the guys who cannot walk down the streets without being recognized, type thing. Now it just became a way of, okay, cool. Now we don't have to pretend to give people money. We can actually just give it to them.
That's all it is. That's all it is.
But at least, I mean, the NFL, I mean, you have more freedom. I mean, there's going to be people that are going to make a profession out of playing college sports.
Look at the Miami quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's going to be professional college quarterbacks that are going to get themselves redshirted if it didn't go well, and they're going to transfer teams, and they're going to transfer to another team, and then transfer to another. Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels have 60 starts in college or something?
Right, and same with Bo Nix, but I mean, like, now if they start off early enough, that's one thing. But I mean, Bo Nix, when he hits his prime of he's going to be on the downside of his career already. He got drafted at 25 or 26. Like
that's crazy.
When he's on the verge of signing his second contract, his first round draft picks have 5-year deals or whatever, he's going to be on the wrong side of 30.
But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see this final game. I would like at least some of these games. How many games were good? 2 or 3?
We've had 3 good. We had 3 good college games, and we had 1 good NFL game, and that's the big. I was never a fan of the NFL expanding, where it's like the idea of we have more meaningful games. No. Let's have better games. Let's really what we want is the build up to the game. But the fact of the matter is that I should not be watching an NFL playoff game and find myself scrolling through my phone, even when I have money on the game. And I'm just kind of like, whatever. Like, it's just kind of,
I agree.
It's where it's going. I mean, and it's not always an old man thing. I mean, that's actually what I had for, a point I was making on an earlier show at Christmas time. For me to be at a Schofield family Christmas and for there to not be one sports arguments, it's just like, what? Like, it's like everyone's kind of had the, I don't really care as much. Like, my uncle does not even bother with season tickets to the Ohio State game because now the tickets are so expensive to finance NIL that he's just like, it's it's more fun to just watch at home now. Like, and this is a guy who
How
went
much
season
are
tickets
they?
to Ohio State for fucking like 30 years.
How much are they?
I don't even know, but I'd imagine they're a decent dollar, or they've got to be. I mean, let's see, because you have the student section. Let me take a look at this one. Cost of Ohio State's season tickets, football season tickets here. Geez. Depending on the zone, I mean, they're getting up there. The seating zones range from 600 to 1,400, so that's not as terrible. But also, I mean, that's not exactly going to games of that size is not,
No.
If you want to watch big games, I guess you don't really want to be there is kind of the thing. Cause that's,
I agree.
And I'm thinking of his age, but I mean, this has been wild. And I'm sure you've noticed this because we're friends with a lot of the same people. Have you noticed this incredible abundance of Bills fans who are always trying to sell their tickets for games?
Yes, it's a high percentage of it. I don't even know.
I see the price tags on those, and I'm like, oh, who the fuck would pay that? I mean, like, I remember going to Bills games for fucking $25 or something.
They get bought because now the Bills are in. Now it's like a popularity contest with the Bills.
Now, this might be the turning point of this one. I am actually finding myself rooting for them this year. Are you at that point yet?
Yes.
Yes. It hurts, doesn't it? It hurts. I know
it hurts. But you know what? As much as I've talked shit about the Bills fans for years, they are fans. There's no being a fair weather Bills fan hasn't really been like an option.
No. If anything, they've been, and this was the first time where I think that going into the season, I thought higher of their team than they did. And that's where I think that was the equilibrium point of where I'm like, no, I don't think they're going to miss Diggs that much. Like,
Yeah. And it turns out they didn't. I think, I think this might, man, the Bills have to go through. The Ravens are a good football team. They can run the ball, obviously.
They have to deal with, so I don't look at it as this matchup as that Derrick Henry has been a nemesis for them. Yeah. So they have to go through their two biggest challengers to get to the Super Bowl. And I look at it being Derrick Henry is the real trick of this matchup coming up. And then they have to do most likely the Mahomes. Now, what would be the most typical Bills thing would be that they beat the Ravens, the Texans upset the Chiefs, and then CJ Stroud goes into Buffalo and then
goes on. Do you like him or no? What is CJ?
I don't dislike him, but I'm just curious where it all went because even at one point early on in this year, I remember them playing the game against Caleb Williams early on in the season and just saying like, wow, one of these guys was billed as a generational prospect and the other guy couldn't get drafted over a guy who's barely my height. Yeah. And like, there was one throw that he made in that game, and I'm like, that's just one of the. And then from that moment on, CJ Stroud has been kind of, But I think it's a lot on. When I watch the Texans, I feel like it's as much on their play calling that it is on him because I'm like, okay, you're going to run the ball into the line on first and second down to set up third and long for CJ Stroud. That's basically every game I watch of the Texans.
Yeah. I think I'm secretly rooting for the Bills, and I'm also. Just even though they're part of my conference, the Detroit Lions, I would not mind if they would win. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Dan Campbell's too loosey-goosey with his
He's gonna let his nuts think instead of his brain at some point in the worst possible moments.
Yeah, I don't know if they can win a championship, but I would be fine if the Bills or the Lions win. I'd be fine. As weird as that is to say. Hey, we've got cities burning up and everything going on. It would just be maybe it's the sign of the end of times. That's how we go out with the Bills. We know Matt Lagnese, of course.
Yes.
The Rams, their defense is pretty fucking good. That's a good defense.
People have told me now, maybe not as much as I shaved the beard, but Sean McVay is a damn fucking good coach too.
Yeah, he is.
And this is the way I describe the quarterback change is that at no point in time during the prime of his career did I consider Matthew Stafford a upper echelon. I considered him like a tier 2 quarterback for most of his time in Detroit. Granted, that was the team around him. But I look at him now as still being one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And he's 38, fucking had neck surgeries, back surgeries, and whatnot.
Still got a cannon.
But that's the
Still
thing
got a
is that
cannon.
he still has arm talents will beat leg talents every day of the week. I'm sorry. Like a guy that can we're missing out on that. I'm even starting to speak positive about Peyton Manning. Okay. As far as that, all of these other guys, when we're going to watch the games coming up this weekend, it's going to be all watching guys extending plays with their legs on third down. And that's the horrible part about having money against them or anything like that. There's not a worse feeling than when you had money against Peyton Manning and it was 3rd and 7 and you watched him at the fucking line of scrimmage and you're like, oh shit. And then he's just going to find that one guy who's got that one thread of opening and hit him and the guy's going to turn up, and it's just like watching a guy pick you apart with their arm is so much more demoralizing than the quarterback that scrambles. Because when quarterbacks scramble, at least they get called for holding every now and again, but watching a surgeon of a passer and, I didn't appreciate greatness in the moment like that because I was measuring Peyton up against Tom Brady. I probably took a couple more digs on him than I would have, but, I still can't believe. Did Eli get voted in the Hall of Fame? Did that happen?
I'm assuming so.
I know I've been seeing a lot about it, but I refuse to believe that, but
I'm assuming so.
But
I think he's
I don't think I just know that I've been seeing a lot more coming up in it because now
I guess it's going to happen in the next couple of days, I guess.
Yeah, it's, it is. And that's why I've never,
he's up for the Hall of Fame.
Gotcha. And that's why I've never concerned myself with the Hall of Fame too much because, hey, you can tell me what you want to tell me on that. But anyways, the reason, with this speaking to the legacy and the life that Bob Uecker led, it led us together talking some sports here. Jason, it was nice chatting with you. I got to go get situated for the rest of my evening. So appreciate you stopping by. And I got to imagine it's a good night to be a bartender in Wisconsin.
Oh, I bet you there's some sorrow being drank tonight for old Uecker.
There's probably some type of, you've told me about the culture of there, but I know that a buddy of mine who works in the bar industry there said Milwaukee has taken this very rough. So, that's got to be like,
sure.
Kind of like too, it's not even just the athletes were losing, but the relationship they had, like Pete Rose and his relationship with the city of Cincinnati, Bob Uecker and his relationship in Milwaukee, Bob Gibson in St. Louis. It's kind of,
well, because you didn't have 97 things to do.
Right. And also, too, is that those guys, Uecker played a couple of things, but he was the announcer forever, and even Pete Rose left and came back for a little bit. But now guys don't have this attachment to just one city the way they did. It's like this unicorn thing, Mike Evans on the fucking Bucks. He's what an old school guy.
It's crazy. But people like Uecker, people have spent a lot of time listening to his radio. That's a lot of time to spend with somebody over, 50 years, however long he was doing it,
I think I saw something that it was something along those lines of that he was responsible for the broadcast of 2% of every game that was broadcast on radio or television, something wild like that. Because if you think about it, there was only so many teams.
Yeah.
He was announcing for so long.
Yeah.
That it's, he's.
I believe it. And so people get really, you get vested with them, I'm sure there's a lot of old people, a lot of boomers are really upset tonight because they probably have been listening to him for the whole time,
Yeah, and again, it's like, and it's one thing where we have the Yogi Berra isms, Yogi Berra was kind of a really good baseball player, but another one just to be just a guy.
Yeah.
And, Major League will still always be one of my favorite movies. And that's actually what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be getting myself ready so I can have, a nice little fun time watching that and laughing harder than I usually do. And, full disclosure here, if you ever, it's a weird, not scared to admit this one, but one of my scenes of a movie that makes me emotional that shouldn't, when Pedro Serrano hits a home run.
Fuck you, Joe Boo.
But that whole scene there, that one gets me a little bit choked up. And now, hearing Bob Uecker, even just the intro to that game where he's actually does it as an actual announcer, it's probably going to be, a little bit, just what an amazing guy he was. That's all I got to say.
He lived a wonderful, great life,
Well,
World
and then here we are now, two knuckleheads like us are
baseball.
sitting here talking about him.
Yeah, but yeah.
All right, Jason, pleasure having you on. We'll be in touch. I'll be about other things down the road and all that good stuff.
All right, see you, buddy.
All right, well, there we had it. We had our Milwaukee native, Jason Alexander, kind of recapping what it was like growing up with Bob Uecker in his life and just kind of his close attachment to the area. So everybody, thank you for tuning in. We had a decent little live stream crowd on this one. Like, subscribe, comment, share, all that douchebag stuff that podcast hosts like myself say. gonna be, trying the best I can to maintain a regular schedule of doing this, but life is getting in the way a lot. But I'm still gonna be kind of recording a couple things. I'm kind of working on a little one. I had an episode that I was originally going to be releasing tomorrow. I apologize to Anthony, who he's very excited. It was his first podcast appearance. Probably gonna be posting it sometime, maybe on Monday or so. But I'm gonna start getting into a little more. A big thing about my journey being here is me no longer drinking alcohol. 2.5 years sober, I think, at this time. I think I'm actually on my anniversary date, or pretty close to 2.5 years. But gonna start having as the sports season winds down before baseball season, gonna start kind of having Ryan's recovery room, maybe is what I'll call that. So got another guest booked up for that one. And everybody, thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and then RIP to a legend, Bob Uecker. And I got to end a somber episode with an upbeat music, but thank you for tuning in. One goddamn like, that's all we got.